It's been a little more than 2 years since Ketanji Brown Jackson was sworn in to become the first black woman to serve as a justice on the United States Supreme Court. She takes stock with Norah O'Donnell.
This was my favorite poem growing up in high school, The Ladder of St. Augustine, because it talked about this value of hard work.
To understand Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, consider the poem she's kept close for decades.
The heights by great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were toiling upward in the night. It's like my favorite summary of how I felt, that I was the person who was going to toil upward in the night, always.
Toiling upward, as Henry Wadsworth Longfellow put it, is how the 116th Justice says she made history.
I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
As the first black female on the Supreme Court, what kind of pressure does that come with?
I think there's a fair amount of attention that comes with being the first. And when eyes are on you, you really do want to perform well.
And this first is determined she won't be the last.
I'm still just so floored from being in this building.
She details her journey to the highest court in her memoir, out Tuesday.
The title, Lovely One.
Yes.
That's what your name means.
It is. So my aunt was in the Peace Corps in Africa when I was born, and my parents really wanted to honor our heritage and asked her to send them a list of African names, and they picked that one, Lovely One, Ketanji Onyeka, which is my given middle name.
Her parents, John and Ellery Brown, grew up in the segregated South, but this middle-class Miami couple had high hopes for their daughter.
I was born within 5 years of the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. So they were like, here's our opportunity to make sure that our daughter can do all the things that we didn't get to do. My parents had raised me to believe that I could do anything I wanted to do. That was my way of thinking about myself.
You also write that your parents inspired a sense of perseverance.
They had a sense of perseverance. You know, my mother used to say, have you seen this being done before? Has anybody ever done this? Well, if they have, then you can do it too. And that was the mindset that they really drilled into me. You keep going.
And that's exactly what she did. By high school, Ketanji Brown was a national speech and debate champion with even bigger ambitions.
This is the part where people recognized that I had said,
I want to eventually have a judicial appointment.
and I had forgotten all about that, wanting to have a judicial appointment, but there it is in my high school yearbook.
Wow.
No surprise, Harvard came next. More unexpected was the young man in lecture hall.
This is the classroom where you met.
This is the classroom where we met. So I would sit, I want to say it was like maybe here with one of my friends.
That's right. I would always try to sit right behind you just to get your attention.
In the row behind me, and then he would lean over and, tap me on the shoulder.
In 1996, she married Patrick Jackson. He was the young surgeon. She was the Harvard law grad, aiming even higher. Jackson clerked for Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer and later worked as a federal public defender. But at home, she admits, she was struggling. A young mother, 2 daughters, one eventually diagnosed as autistic.
I think I was probably harder on myself and harder perhaps on my daughter than I should have been. It's like I didn't really believe that there could have been some sort of neurological issue, and therefore kind of pushed both herself and me.
In 2013, the long-sought federal judgeship did come. Years later, a surprise announcement from presidential candidate Joe Biden.
I'm looking forward to making sure there's a black woman on the Supreme Court to make sure we, in fact, get every representation.
Dr. Jackson, what did you think when you heard him say that?
I have always thought Ketanji would be doing this job. When I interviewed to come to Georgetown. The chair at the time said, "Why do you want to come to Georgetown?" And I said, "Because we need to be in D.C. because my wife is going to be a Supreme Court justice." So
He always knew.
knew
He
that.
always knew. I, of course, was like, yeah, right.
My admiration and love for Ketanji is palpable. Like, it's like it's uncontrollable. Like this is not a volunteer thing. Yeah, like I wish it was controllable, but it is not.
So it wasn't a surprise when you heard Joe Biden say, "I'm going to nominate a black woman to this."
No, I thought he said, "I'm going to nominate Ketanji."
Like that's what you heard in your mind.
That's what I heard.
Then, in 2022, it happened.
I'd like you to go to the Supreme Court. How about that?
Sir, I would be so honored.
At 51, Ketanji Brown Jackson became the newest member of the Supreme Court.
Since you joined the court 2 years ago, you immediately became the most prolific questioner among the justices. No one else is even close to you. Why do you laugh?
Because I was the most prolific questioner as a district court judge as well. Because I have a lot of questions. I think it's harder, obviously, when you're one of 9 than when you're all alone. And there's an adjustment period that I think had to happen from my perspective. I wasn't doing anything different, and maybe I should have been. But I have questions, and we have a very complicated legal system, and these issues are hard.
One of the hardest issues the Supreme Court tackled this year involved Donald Trump. The question, could the former president face criminal charges for his efforts to undo his 2020 election defeat to Joe Biden? In July, the court ruled 6-3 along ideological lines that Trump was entitled to immunity for official acts as president. Jackson dissented.
You were concerned about broad immunity.
I was concerned about a system that appeared to provide immunity for one individual under one set of circumstances, when we have a criminal justice system that had ordinarily treated everyone the same.
Are you prepared that this election could end up before the Supreme Court?
As prepared as anyone can be. Let me ask you, are you prepared for all of the news cycles that you're getting as a result of this election?
No.
No, exactly. I mean, I think there are legal issues that arise out of the political process. And so the Supreme Court has to be prepared to respond if that should be necessary.
Today, fewer than half of Americans say they have a favorable view of the Supreme Court. Pick your reason: the partisan confirmation battles, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, or undisclosed trips and gifts given to justices, including Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas.
By one analysis, Justice Thomas has accepted around $4 million in trips, travel, and gifts over the past 2 decades. Is that inappropriate?
Oh, I'm not going to comment on other justices' interpretations of the rules or what they're doing.
What's your personal code of ethics?
Well, I follow the rules, whatever they are with respect to ethical obligations, and it's important, in my view, to do so. It really boils down to impartiality. That's what the rules are about. People are entitled to know if you're accepting gifts as a judge, so that they can evaluate whether or not your opinions are impartial.
The president wants a binding code for the Supreme Court that would enforce gift disclosures and recusals. Do you see a problem with that?
So, a binding code of ethics is pretty standard for judges. And so I guess the question is the Supreme Court any different? And I guess I have not seen a persuasive reason as to why the court is different than the other courts.
Are you considering supporting an enforcement mechanism?
I am considering supporting it as a general matter. I'm not going to get into commenting on particular policy proposals, but from my perspective, I don't have any problem with an enforceable code. This is Justice Thurgood Marshall's mantle clock.
Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson will likely be on the court for decades, but she's already been sewn into history.
It was handmade by a woman from Texas, and I have it right across from my desk.
And the opinions from her desk will shape the nation, just as she hopes her story will.
Your family went from desegregation to the Supreme Court.
Yes, yes, in one generation.
Yeah. It is the story of the promise of America.
I think so.
Is it also still a story of exception?
I think less and less every day, which is really what progress means. When you go from never having seen or done this thing before to seeing someone do it, and then it's happening more often, and then you feel like we've progressed. And it's wonderful.